7 million years ago. The world was not ours. The air was thick with dust and thunder. Forests stretched endlessly, their shadows broken by open grasslands shimmering in the heat. Great storms rolled across the horizon, flooding rivers that carved their way through the newborn continents of Africa. The earth trembled beneath the weight of creatures long forgotten. Colossal elephants, ancient crocodiles, saber-toothed predators. And somewhere among them, fragile, uncertain, and small, walked the first humans. They did not yet understand what they were becoming. They had no words, no fire, no weapons. But they had one thing stronger than claws, faster than teeth, the will to survive. This is the story of that will, of the first steps toward humanity forged in hunger, fear, and instinct. This is life 7 million years ago. The world at this time was changing, violently, endlessly. Africa, the cradle of all humankind, was alive with tectonic power. Forests rose and fell with the shifting climate. Lush jungles became grasslands, and grasslands turned to desert. Rain came and vanished for years at a time. For the animals who lived here, adaptation was survival. For our earliest ancestors, it was destiny. They were not yet human, not as we are now. Scientists call them Sahelanthropus tchadensis, one of the earliest known hominins. Small, barely a meter tall, with a face part ape, part human. They moved between trees and open plains, searching for food and safety. They had begun to stand upright, not from choice, but necessity. The forest no longer protected them. To reach the scattered fruit and carcasses left by predators, they had to walk the ground, and on the ground, danger ruled. Every step carried risk, every sound a possible death sentence. The world of 7 million years ago was merciless. Leopards and saber-toothed cats hunted silently through the tall grass. Massive hyenas, ancestors of the beasts that roam Africa today, fought over bones. Gigantic crocodiles waded in muddy rivers, motionless, ancient, patient. In this world, humans were prey. A fragile, hair-covered primate, caught between the safety of trees and the hunger of the plains. But even prey can evolve. Fear became awareness, awareness became learning, and learning became survival. They began to watch. They learned the rhythm of the land, when predators hunted when they slept, where the wind carried scent. They followed vultures to find the remains of a kill, using patience instead of power. In the endless war between teeth and thought, something new was being born. Intelligence, food was everything. Without tools or fire, every meal was a victory. The first humans survived on fruits, roots, insects, and sometimes the scraps of carcasses left behind by lions or hyenas. To find food meant to risk death. Every sound in the brush, every shadow could be the end. But they adapted. They developed endurance, the ability to travel far, to wait longer than the beasts they feared. Their survival was not built on strength, but on persistence. As the climate changed, so did they. They learned to move with the seasons, to remember where the fruit trees grew, where water gathered after rain. Their memories, once fleeting, began to stretch across time. It was not yet knowledge, but it was becoming something close. And from this growing mind came the earliest spark of what would one day become humanity. In this world, predators ruled by power, but our ancestors learned the strength of unity. A lone creature stood no chance. But together, they could warn each other, defend their young, share food, and mourn their dead. This was the beginning of something extraordinary, cooperation. It started with small gestures, a call, a glance, a touch of reassurance. Through instinct and emotion, they formed the first primitive societies. Each member became part of something larger, something more resilient. Together, they survived what nature could not destroy. And within that fragile cooperation lay the foundation of all human culture. empathy, the ability to feel for one another, to protect, to remember. In the silence of a prehistoric night, huddled beneath the stars, the first humans looked at one another and saw not just another animal, but a companion. That simple realization would change everything. Still, the earth gave no mercy. The climate grew harsher. Droughts turned forests into dry savannas. Rivers vanished. Herds migrated. And with them, our ancestors were forced to move too, following life wherever it went. Those who could not adapt disappeared. Entire species rose and fell within the blink of geological time. But the survivors, the ancestors who would lead to us, learned something no other creature had mastered: foresight. They began to plan. They remembered where the rains would return, where the fruit would ripen again. Their minds began to hold the future, and in that simple miracle, evolution took a leap forward. Predators shaped them, but so did fear. The constant threat of death sharpened their senses. The smell of blood, the flicker of movement, the pattern of a predator's hunt. They learned to listen to silence, for silence meant danger. To read the tracks on the ground, for every print was a story of what came before. Fear became their teacher, and in mastering fear, they began to rise above it. The savannah was their crucible, a place of endless risk and reward. Those who adapted survived. Those who failed became part of the earth that fed the next. From that brutal cycle emerged something unbreakable: resilience. Not the kind born from comfort, but from enduring the impossible. That resilience, carried through millions of years, still lives in every human heartbeat today. Long before the first fire burned, another spark was lit, the spark of thought. Somewhere, perhaps beneath an ancient fig tree, an ancestor looked at a broken branch and imagined its use. A rock struck another rock, not yet a tool, but a possibility. Curiosity was awakening. That small act, to see not what is, but what could be, is the birth of imagination. It would take nearly 5 million years for that spark to ignite into flame. But it began here, among creatures who could barely speak, yet already dreamed. As time moved on, evolution sculpted new forms: Australopithecus, Paranthropus, and eventually Homo habilis, the first to shape stone. But it all began with those first walkers of 7 million years ago. They carried within them the code of endurance, curiosity, and unity that would define our species. They did not know it, but every step they took on the hot African earth was the beginning of a story that would lead to everything we are. Our hands, our minds, our language, our fire, all born from creatures who once lived in constant fear. They survived not because they were the strongest, but because they learned. And in learning, they became something new. Today, their bones rest beneath layers of earth and time, but their legacy lives on, in our instincts, in our dreams, in our need to explore and endure. When we struggle, when we adapt, when we reach for something beyond survival, we echo them. Every heartbeat, every breath we take, carries the rhythm of those ancient lives. The same determination that kept them alive in the wild still drives us forward now, from the savannah to the stars. They were not gods, they were not monsters, they were us before we knew who we were. And through 7 million years of chaos, hunger, and change, they endured. Because survival was not their choice, it was their nature. They lived, they died, they evolved, and from their ashes rose the story of humanity. So when you look at the night sky, remember this: long before the first city was built, before the first fire burned, before the first word was spoken, a small creature walked upright beneath those same stars. It did not know why. It only knew that standing meant seeing farther, and seeing farther meant survival.